Chapter CH 48.1. Danger is approaching. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Callous Editor. Walker Tangwan had already helped Lin Bo tidy up the items. He asked, without raising his head. What thing? Just say it. Instead, Tangwan's manner left Zhong He not knowing how to say it. If he directly said that he was De Zhuang, he didn't have to toss about. Would Tangwan divorce him? Seeing how Tangwan had excitedly prepared so many things, wanting to take him out to play, Zhong He took a deep breath and calmly said, "Fine then, I'll tell you when I return." Puzzled, Tangwan glanced at the other. What? How mysterious. Lin Bo stifled his laughter. Did you prepare these things for the young master? Yes. Tangwan said, delighted. I received the tickets that the Good Baby production company gave me, so I want to take De Zhuang out to play when he has a break. I researched strategies for bringing a baby. It said that all of these things are necessary, especially the super diapers. Zhong He cut in with a dark expression. De Zhuang won't go. Tangwan's expression also cooled. Why? Zhong He coldly snorted and unhappily said. Because this super diaper looks too stupid. Tangwan raised his eyebrows. This was a matter of quarreling with him. Just like cats, big cats really couldn't be spoiled. If he said he'd lose his temper, then he'd lose his temper, but the problem was that he didn't know why he had lost his temper. It isn't for you to use, so why are you upset? You're a tiger, not a cat. Did you have too much breakfast and nothing to do? Are you so idle that you're throwing tantrums? Zhong He originally wanted to leave, but he didn't after Tangwan's direct attack. You differentiate species by size. Tangwan gestured with his hands, how else? From Zhong He's perspective, only Tangwan, an idiot who wouldn't tell species apart, was dumb enough to be so confident and argue with him, especially arrogantly. However, there was no way that he could correct him because he was dumb. Lin Bo stared at the couple who quarreled first thing in the morning, but still hadn't managed to resolve it. He quickly collected all of the items and asked Tangwan. Where should I put all this? Put it in my live broadcasting studio. Throw it out. Why should they be thrown away? De Zhuang is coming this weekend. I need to use them. If you throw these things out, I'll let him come. Tangwan cocked his head, uncomprehendingly staring at Zhong He and his tough manner. He somehow felt that something was wrong. You #K2026, #K2026, why are you so emotional? Zhong He's expression was calm and his words were righteous. Because these things are too ugly and it'll affect a tiger's attractiveness index. Tangwan patiently explained. These things really can't be thrown out. These are essentials. A lot of parents said so, and if you don't believe it, then you can look at the guides. Zhong He remained silent with a cold expression and a firm attitude. Then it settled. Tangwan's manner suddenly changed. I'll throw them out and you'll let De Zhuang come. Zhong He kept his expression calm, then finally left. Tangwan stood by the doorway, quietly watching Zhong He leave and board an aircraft. Only then did he suddenly approach Lin Bo and take back the things in his arms, beaming. Even if I obeyed him, these things still need to be used when we go out. This is called taking the initiative. Lin Bo smothered his smile and gave Tangwan a big thumbs up, amazing. Quickly, help me hide it. We can't let Zhong He know. Tangwan happily and diligently stashed the items away in the live broadcasting room. Lin Bo quickly covered it all with a piece of cloth. The two people cheerfully high-fived. They hid it all perfectly. After the pressing business, Lin Bo happily went to feed the fish. Tangwan felt that he was still missing something. He attached a leash to the Samoyed and passed it to Lin Bo so he could take it out on a walk. After the other took the leash, Tangwan stealthily took a rear-view photo of Lin Bo walking the dog and uploading it to Weibo. An elderly man and a smiling, angelic Samoyed, or elderly man and dog for short. On Saturday, De Zhuang came over wearing his backpack. Having not seen him for a long time, the little fellow had grown a lot and was over 10 kilograms. He was heavier in his embrace. Excited, Tang Wan pulled De Zhuang closer to kiss and pet him. No matter how he looked at it, he was a proper black and gold Highland. Your fur here is puffed up, so you definitely need a scarf. Then, you'll be just as handsome as your uncle. Zhong He obediently allowed Tang Wan to pet him. He was very pleased. He had said long ago that his fur was the most beautiful. Thinking about it, Tang Wan really did like to brush his fur, especially around his neck. Every time, Tang Wan took special care to brush that area. Zhong He's mood was excellent and he tilted his head to allow Tang Wan to brush his fur. While Tang Wan brushed, he sighed regretfully. In the future, he might not have such opportunities. As the child grew larger, the amount of times he visited decreased. After smoothing down the fluffy fur on De Zhuang's neck, Tang Wan took out a blue bow tie he had prepared beforehand and put it on him. A beautiful gentleman had appeared. The more Tang Wan looked at it, the more he liked it and he couldn't stop taking pictures of De Zhuang. In the future, if my child follows his father, will he grow up like you? Zhuang how are you so good looking? Zhong He's ears twitched and he looked at Tang Wan in astonishment. He was still thinking of children. He really needed to seriously think about this more. Tang Wan scooped him up. Good. We should get going. Today, we can play to our heart's content since you have to leave when we get back. Tang Wan accidentally rubbed the kitten's toe bean. He made a noise of confusion, then rubbed it again a few more times. Puzzled, he pulled the cat's paw up so he could look at it. Zhuang what are you wearing? Zhong He solemnly told him. Combat clothes. Tang Wan was amused. You little brat, what combat clothes? What do you want to fight? A crab. These so-called combat clothes could be transformed into those that wrapped around their entire body with the press of a button when a beastman was shifting to their human form. During combat, sometimes it would be more convenient to take on a beast form than it would be in their human forms. When they needed to shift back into a human form when they encountered an enemy, they couldn't be naked. Therefore, the army researched such equipment. Tang Wan, who was a country bumpkin several thousand years behind technological advances, was clueless about such military things. However, Tang Wan understood from the name that it was for combat use and he relentlessly teased De Zhuang, have you finally caught secondary school disease? How have you caught more and more of the symptoms? Getting combat outfits while you're still so young. Did you come from the Nicholas Empire? Zhong He was already immune to Tang Wan's teasing. When Tang Wan was faced with such things, he had to be mischievous. However, Zhong He was only concerned about. What's the Nicholas Empire? I've never heard of it. Tang Wan solemnly spewed nonsense. It's a very powerful, evil, secondary school empire. All of the leaders are called Long Outyan. Zhong He's ears twitched. Who's Long Outyan? Just by hearing it, he knew it was a man. Tang Wan saw that he truly believed him and laughed. He carried De Zhuang and gave him a few more rubs. Foolish child, I'm teasing you. You believe the story that I made up. There has to be a limit on your secondary school disease. Early on, other people will think it's fun, then it'll give people a headache, and finally, they'll want to kill you. Since you're like this now, Tang Wan murmured to himself, then suddenly changed the topic, because you're so good looking, you'll be cute no matter what you do. Zhong He burned with suppressed anger. Every time they got to this point, he would say coaxing words. This devious human. Tang Wan asked Ji Yen to bring along the prepared items. All of the foods, drinks, and other items were pushed out in a little cart, and Tang Wan happily placed Zhong He in it. He immediately took out the super diaper. Good child, come put it on. Zhong He. Hadn't it been thrown away? Tang Wan saw the refusal in Zhong He's eyes. He moved close and used a good-natured, cajoling voice. Good babies need to wear this. What would you do if you needed to use the bathroom? We can just solve it on the spot, right? He angrily bared his teeth, fumingly squeezing out 3 words. I won't go. Alright, if you won't use it then you don't have to use it. Don't be angry. When He was in his human form, Tang Wan would always argue back a bit, but in his current form, Tang Wan would discuss it with him. In other words, if you were good looking, then you got what you wanted. Tang Wan stroked the kitten's head, then you must tell me in advance if you want to use the bathroom. Did your teachers teach you how to do this? Sensing the difference in the treatment, he was angry. I'm not stupid. Tang Wan also felt wronged. I was just afraid that you'd forget while you were having fun. Why are you so fierce? He remained silent. He wasn't being fierce, he just bared his teeth a little, nothing more. The corner of Tang Wan's lips curled and he unhappily asked. You don't love your daddy. He had the beginnings of a headache. How had he married such a foolish wife? While on the road, Tang Wan still felt extremely wronged and he continued to tease Do you not love your daddy? Could you have forgotten how good your daddy is to you? Do you love your daddy? During that time, he had bared his teeth a few times, quickly being rubbed mad by Tang Wan. He would have admitted that he loved him if he hadn't included the daddy part. Love you, I only love you, is that enough? Stop shaking already. Yet Tang Wan kept at it, everything always going back to, do you love daddy? Now, he wanted to hit him. Even though they had already arrived at the theme park, Tang Wan still hadn't gotten the response that he wanted. He despairingly carried He down the aircraft. When his feet touched the ground, he was stunned by the large cat climbing tree standing at the front gates. Fuck. Too spectacular. This cat climbing tree was one which he had designed. It was over 100 meters tall, and the cat bowls were over 2 meters in diameter. There were countless cat bowls and countless ladders creating a network. It was about 10 floors tall. The most incredible thing was that there was a pillar reaching towards the sky that was 1 meter in diameter. There was rope winding around it at the top. There were many people surrounding it, wanting to give it a try and rolling up their sleeves to get ready to climb up. As the designer, Tang Wan was actually the one who was the most surprised. This cat climbing tree is too amazing. Ji Yen had already handed in a ticket, obediently saying. We can go in and see it. Tang Wan pulled the cat in his arms closer and reminded him. Don't run around all over the place by yourself. There are a lot of people and it won't be easy to find you if you get lost. He rubbed his own nose, I can find you by your scent. Tang Wan used all his strength to tighten his grip on the cat in his embrace. I'm just reminding you not to run off, so don't argue with me now. He gasped for breath, his tail stuck out straight. This was someone who wanted to murder his husband. Tang Wan entered the theme park and, at a glance, could see that his own name was on the sign next to the cat climbing tower, designer. Tang Wan. Tang Wan's lips couldn't help but curl up a little. At the time, he hadn't known that it would be so big. No wonder Bo Li Xiao had asked him what they should do if it was very large. He had replied without thinking. Stack it infinitely with a lot of identical ones. It's fine to just pile it on. And they actually stacked it. Tang Wan looked at the cat in his embrace, encouraging him. Do you want to go play? Ah, he. Chapter 48.2 You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Callous Editor. Walker Tang Wan was also rather excited because there were a lot of high-tech things here that he had never seen before. When he stayed at home, he could just lounge around, but when he leaves home, he ought to play to his heart's desire. Anyway, he had a VIP ticket and so he didn't need to line up. He could play with whatever he wanted to play on. He had also never been here before. He attended military school when he was 16 years old, was on the battlefield when he was 19 years old, became a marshal when he was 25 years old, and wounded when he was 27 years old until now. It had been a very long time since he was able to experience how modern, ordinary people lived and the things they enjoyed. There were a lot of fun things that he had never seen before. Seeing Tang Wan being so excited, it wouldn't be a big deal if he went out to test things. Seeing that Zong he wasn't opposed to it, Tang Wan carried him to the side of the cat climbing tree. Tang Wan took a safety harness and tied it around the other's waist, softly encouraging him. Zhuang, boys need an adventurous spirit. Don't be afraid, it's almost like training. You just need to climb up there. Tang Wan pointed towards an area that was about 3 meters from the ground. He guessed that De Zhuang could test his courage by climbing there. Tang Wan's arrival attracted a number of people's gazes. As a young, beautiful Asian carrying a good-looking child, he would be eye-catching no matter where he went. In addition, his child was different from the others, like it was a different breed. There was a youth who reminded him. Young children are playing over there. He won't be able to climb here, this is for adults to play on. Tang Wan looked over at the area the other had pointed towards. Over there, sure enough, the highest point on the smaller version of the cat climbing tree was about 3 meters tall. There were a lot of children surrounding it. Tang Wan embarrassingly thanked the other and scooped up Zong He, coaxing him. Zhuang, let's go over there. There's a small one. Zong He glanced up with a cold expression. With a powerful step, he had already jumped out of Tang Wan's arms and followed the cat climbing tree's pillar up. He crawled up with a swish, and in the blink of an eye, was 5 or 6 meters up. Tang Wan panicked, De Zhuang. Come back down here. He looked up at the kitten again. He was moving quickly from place to place, his paws hitting each shelf. His movements were graceful and confident. Tang Wan put his hand over his chest, his face pale with fear. Ji Yen quickly reassured him. It's okay, you don't need to worry. The young master can do it. To him, such a thing isn't demanding. Really, he's climbed one harder than this. Tang Wan was still apprehensive, just what kind of school do you go to? Isn't this mistreating children? This child is normally ambitious, but I didn't expect that he would go up so high. What do I do if he falls down? Ji Yen paused, not knowing how to answer. He faltered and choked out. Doesn't he still have the safety harness? The matter of a 10-kilogram child climbing up the adult's climbing tree quickly spread around. In less than a minute, there were many people circled around and applauding and cheering Zong He on. Little fellow, you can do it. So amazing. Continue climbing. Don't be scared. More amazing than adults. What species is he? Too incredible. He's going up, he's going up. He's jumped really high. Hashtag K2026, hashtag K2026, the more the surrounding people were all lively and eagerly watching, the more nervous Tang Wan became. He wanted to curse at all of the surrounding idiots. It wasn't your family's child that was climbing so high, and if he fell down, he still wasn't your family's child. At this time, someone said, the pattern of this child's fur looks very familiar. No matter how you look at it, doesn't he look like eating, sleeping, and scolding De Zhuang's family's child? Tang's nephew. That child's called De Zhuang. Then, many people's gazes were pulled towards Tang Wan. They looked at his dark eyes and hair, his delicate appearance, and then looked back at the black and gold-patterned furry dumpling. An especially enthusiastic girl tilted her head and asked Tang Wan. Are you eating, sleeping, and scolding De Zhuang? Tang Wan expressionlessly shook his head, no, I don't know, I don't recognize it. With the successive denials, he managed to persuade the girl and she was too embarrassed to continue to question him. When he looked at De Zhuang again, he had already climbed to the highest level, unable to be seen with the naked eye. A flying camera noticed him at this time and quickly rushed over. Everyone could see that the child was calmly sitting in the cat bowl, holding onto the peak's pillar. They were all stunned by his leisurely movements. This was a genius. Tang Wan was almost frightened to death and he angrily yelled. That little brat. Hearing these words, the corners of Ji Yan's mouth twitched unnaturally. After leaving a mark at the top with his paw, Zhong He, who was sitting at the highest level, prepared to come down. Terrified, Tang Wan watched the image on the monitor. He tremblingly grabbed onto Ji Yan's wrist. This child, going up was simple, but coming back down was the most difficult thing. If there was a misstep, he'd tumble through the air. His safety should be guaranteed, but what if the child was so frightened that he'd never be able to climb high again? It was a pleasant surprise, then, when the kitten still jumped from place to place, deftly landing on every level. It was still a touch and go, his leaps were tall and went far, and he quickly arrived at the bottom. Even when he landed at the level in front of Tang Wan, he wasn't panting. He calmly used a paw to push at the harness on his waist, hinting that he wanted to take it off. Still nervous, Tang Wan held him in his embrace and gave him a smack. Wasn't that dangerous? I asked you to come down, so why didn't you listen to me? In the future, I won't bring you out to play. If something happens, how would I explain it to your family? Zhong He rubbed his furry paw pad against Tang Wan's body. Tang Wan would be explaining it to himself, so he could do it however he wanted to. Tang Wan was so mad that he wanted to bite the cat. If you don't listen to me, I'll bite your ear. Zhong He flicked his tail, content. He wasn't afraid at all. The surrounding people broke out into enthusiastic applause. Adults hadn't been able to climb it, but unexpectedly, this child had been able to. An excited staff member also rushed over, this heroic little warrior. This is a gift from our sponsors. A special reward for climbing to the top. Tang Wan held Zhong He in his embrace and took a deep breath, calming himself a bit. He politely asked the staff member, what present? The staff member opened the red box and smiled. A warrior's medal and a bonus of 10,000 star coins. Take good care of it. Tang Wan was pleasantly surprised and rubbed De Zhuang's fur. However, he was still unhappy with De Zhuang. Fine, Xiao Ji can take it. Thank you to the sponsors. After Tang Wan finished speaking, he turned around, wanting to leave. He took advantage of the situation to teach De Zhuang a lesson. Don't think that I can forgive you just because you earned a gift. I'm confiscating the gift because you didn't listen to me. The staff member quickly chased after them. Please wait, you have to sign as evidence of taking the gift. Oh, okay. Tang Wan had no choice but to turn around and take the electronic pen the staff member offered him, signing his own name. The staff member looked down, eyes instantly wide open. Tang Wan. He compared it to the designer's name under the cat climbing tree. It was unexpectedly the same. It really is Tang Wan. Eating, sleeping, and scolding De Zhuang. Oh my god. It really is. Tang Wan's fans knew that his surname was Tang, so they always yelled out Tang Tang. They hadn't known until the cat climbing tower came out that it was eating, sleeping, and scolding De Zhuang, who had designed it when he mentioned it during the live broadcast. Now, they knew that that person was Tang Wan and that feline child was De Zhuang. It was like Tang Wan's fans had signal receivers installed onto the tops of their heads, the news passing quickly from person to person, and they were all frantically looking for Tang Wan. A nice visit to the theme park had turned into a game to look for Tang Wan. Tang Wan's Weibo had exploded, many fans uploading videos that they had just taken. They pointed at Tang Wan's nose and asked, "Are you this beautiful Asian little big brother? You dared to go out to play, so do you dare to admit it?" Tang Wan had run away while carrying De Zhuang, and was eating ice cream in a pavilion. He silently watched the many people below him wandering around. He whispered to Ji Yan. "We have the VIP pass. We don't have to line up for anything, so even if they see me, they can't catch me. Do you think they'd be angry? It would be good if they were so angry that their fur fried. If they were so angry that they became bald, do you think they'd blame me? Ji Yen. It was unlikely. They weren't bald even if you teased them like this, they ought to be used to it. At this moment in Duke Tang's residence, Lady Tang received information from the housekeeper about Tang Wan's day out. She promptly decided. This is a rare opportunity. If he's alive, then we're all dead. The old housekeeper's expression deepened. If the Duke somehow finds out, he might blame you. Blame me. He's even more ruthless than I am. I am the stepmother, but he is the biological father. I dare to guarantee that he would kill his own son for the sake of his dukedom's honor. He's afraid of the consequences. He won't act if he doesn't investigate the person Tang Yu was with. Lady Tang, who was pleasant and sweet in front of Duke Tang, had another, haughty, cold, and vicious face when she was in front of the housekeeper. She bitterly said. But I can't wait. If he speaks out about such matters, even the Duke won't let me go. Uncle Lien, since the situation has progressed to this point, we can't be soft-hearted. I need to consider my own son. At the time, I wasn't vigilant and the little bastard ran off. I haven't had a good night's sleep these past few years. I have nightmares whenever I close my eyes. I dream that he'll run back and reveal what I had done. I can't let him go. If not, we would die. Tang Lien sighed, especially rough. Sounding in his old age, I'm already so old. Death is not to be regretted. This is the last thing I will do for you. At that time, what I shouldn't have done was to let you become familiar with Duke Tang. Otherwise, none of this would have happened. Lady Tang laughed softly, her laugh gradually becoming more docile and meek. I know you're good to me. Mother has already forgiven you for so many years, I also respect you. Thank you for helping me so much, father. With this, father, Tang Lien's entire body trembled and he closed his murky eyes. He tightened his grip on his cane. His voice was casual but unexpectedly heavy. All right, I know. Lady Tang. Chapter ch 49.1. I want Tang Wan's life. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Callous Editor. Walker Tang Wan didn't know that danger was coming, he was fighting a battle of wits and courage with his fans. He'd let his fans catch a glimpse of him, but they couldn't catch him. After teasing his fans until they exploded in anger, he had finally had enough fun. He pressed De Zhuang onto the table and used him as a pillow. I'm tired, I don't want to move. I want to go home. Tang Wan rubbed against the soft pillow. He lazily straightened out his legs like an unliftable giant gelatin dessert. Zone he turned around and licked his forehead. If you're so tired after playing, you can go home. Idiot. Tang Wan unhappily grabbed his tail, your words really are the same as your uncle's. Your mouth is really poisonous. Zone he remained silent for a little while, then tapped his paw on Tang Wan's finger. He said solemnly. After we get back, I need to talk to you about something. Oh, do you have a little secret? Tang Wan smiled and pinched the paw that was right in front of him. Okay, you can tell me after we get back. Which girl from your class do you like? Did you give them snacks? Zone he wearily pulled back his paw. He was being serious, he didn't want to hide his identity any longer. It was too annoying. On the aircraft, Tang Wan had De Zhuang in his arms and he was leaning drowsily against the seat. Ji Yen considerately pulled the 4 seats flat, forming a soft surface. Tang Wan lay comfortably on it and the cat in his embrace yawned. He told Ji Yen. Xiao Ji, wake me up when we're almost home. Zone he used a paw to pull the blanket next to him slightly closer and Ji Yen quickly pulled it up for him. Zone he was happily lying in Tang Wan's embrace and closed his eyes. The aircraft's speed decreased, flying slowly and smoothly. Ji Yan adjusted the aircraft's internal temperature, allowing Tang Wan to sleep even more comfortably. Not long after they left the theme park, Tang Wan was sound asleep. After a while, Zhong He opened his eyes, vigilant. He climbed out from Tang Wan's arms, his eyes observing the scenery outside. Ji Yan followed his gaze. He sensed that something was wrong. A person who was constantly facing danger would be more perceptive than a regular person. This ability allowed them to anticipate danger. Their alertness was a conditioned response. Ji Yan softly asked. "Marshal, should I wake for an up?" Zhong He coldly looked outside. "Wake him up in 3 minutes so he has a 2-minute buffer. In 5 minutes, the aircraft will fly over the abandoned 1002 distribution depot. If they want to make a move, then they will definitely make it there." Ji Yan calmly agreed. He twisted the button on his wrist and his body was covered in a black combat outfit. He had already finished preparing for combat. Zhong He shook his head. "In the future, don't let him see you like this." Ji Yan. Zhong He was discontent. "You'll scare him." Ji Yan obediently withdrew the combat outfit, not daring to refute. Zhong He was still sitting by Tang Wan's pillow, calmly looking outside. He silently counted the time. After 3 minutes, Tang Wan was awoken by Ji Yan. Bewildered, he asked. "What's going on?" Ji Yan crouched by Tang Wan and dutifully answered. "In 2 minutes, our aircraft will suffer an attack. Don't be afraid." Tang Wan looked outside. The scenery was exactly the same as it normally was, but since Ji Yan had said so and there was a lack of time, Tang Wan wouldn't hold him back by asking too many questions. He scooped up the cat sitting next to him into his arms and rubbed his head. He gently but firmly said. "Don't be afraid, I'll protect you." Zhong He. L.RG. Sure enough, as Zhong He had expected, when they were flying above the abandoned 1002 distribution depot, an attack suddenly burst out from the ground. The aircraft instantly dodged the shot from the particle gun that came from below. After rolling in the air for a few times, a pair of steel wings grew out and the aircraft turned into a fighter aircraft. The place where Tang Wan was sitting had been shifted to the interior, to the position of the command center. The 4 seats broke apart, shifting to the commander's position. The cat in Tang Wan's arms had a stupefied expression. "Fuck. It's transformed." Without waiting for a reaction, the seatbelt had automatically fastened itself around his waist, fixing him firmly to the seat. A seat from the front of the plane shifted over. The pilot was a tall, bald man who wasn't nervous at all. He laughed and said. "Furan, I applied to be able to have the ability to use fighter aircraft, so I also want to have the ability to strike back." Tang Wan didn't even think, do it. These weren't superfluous words. If he wasn't fighting back, was he waiting to be beaten? If he had to ask in advance when they were to dodge, they would have been shot down a long time ago. After the bald man received the command, the fighter aircraft immediately rotated 180 degrees and rolled down. Tang Wan's head buzzed from listening to the roar outside, flames flying in all directions. The bald man whistled. "Reporting, Furan. The little annoyance that's been following us had already been disposed of." Tang Wan wanted to curse. He couldn't say anything, this brother was a little ferocious. At this time, there was another round of firing from the particle guns. It was accompanied by a number of damaged suicide aircrafts. Tang Wan's head rang, and he clutched the cat in his arms closer, his face white. In order to evade danger, the aircraft rolled again, and rolled 700 degrees. Tang Wan, who had never trained for this before, gagged twice, his lips white. Seeing him like this, Zhong He couldn't help but wiggle out from Tang Wan's embrace. Tang Wan endured his dizziness and spent a lot of effort to grab Zhong He. He could only touch the other's tail. Tang Wan yelled out, worried. "It's dangerous, De Zhuang." Zhong He sighed. "Actually, I had wanted to talk it over with you when we got back home. Unfortunate. Close your eyes, I'll return quickly. Shocked, Tang Wan's eyes widened. He still hadn't comprehended the other's meaning, staring blankly at De Zhuang with increasingly large eyes. He had turned into the 2-meter-long tiger with black and gold fur that he was familiar with, and then immediately began to faintly glow. Zhong He, dressed entirely in black combat attire, appeared before his eyes. Tang Wan was completely dumbstruck. The Zhuang that had turned into Zhong He. At the moment, there was no time to explain to him. Zhong He's voice deepened. Open the back cabin. I'm going down. The pilot finally became somber. Marshal, it's too dangerous for you to go down by yourself. The situation down there is unclear, and you are already. Zhong He was impatient and watched the next round of attacks approach. The person who was suffering was Tang Wan. He said in a cold voice. Execute the command. Yes. The bald man didn't dare to say any more. The aircraft's back cabin was opened. Tang Wan blankly stared as Zhong He jumped from the back cabin. Zhong He. Tang Wan didn't have the time to think about why he had shifted, and his nervous heart jumped. Unfortunately, he was held in place by his seatbelt and he couldn't stand up. Ji Yan pressed down on his shoulder, consoling him. Furen, it's just a small situation. The marshal will return very quickly. Close your eyes, don't look. What? Tang Wan just happened to look past the window, wanting to catch Zhong He's trail, before Ji Yan covered his eyes. Ji Yan's voice was very quiet. It was like he was his normal docile self, unhurriedly soothing Tang Wan's frayed mental state. Furen, the marshal doesn't want you to see, so don't look. Tang Wan calmed down, sitting still and allowing Ji Yan to cover his eyes. He didn't need to see to know what was going on. Actually, he couldn't imagine Zhong He defeating that many people by himself. He was only worried about whether Zhong He would be in danger and if he would be wounded. In such a situation, in order to survive, other people had to be killed. He understood that Zhong He didn't want him to see him killing people. Seeing that he wasn't struggling, Ji Yan loosed his hands, apologizing. I didn't have any manners. Tang Wan shook his head, gritting his teeth with a displeased face and waited quietly. Suddenly, the fighter aircraft dashed forward at the speed of light, and the bald man angrily cursed. Fuck. The marshal turned it up too high. Who said that he was laying down for 3 years and couldn't be agile? Tang Wan subconsciously looked out the window. The scenery from before had already disappeared and had become a dark blur. It was as if the aircraft had entered a vacuum. Once again, Tang Wan anxiously looked around for any trace of Zhong He. Ji Yan's hands were still pressed against his shoulder. To calm him down, Ji Yan said, Furen, relax. The marshal will win. Tang Wan was still worried. What do you mean? Ji Yan smiled and said. The entire distribution depot beneath us has disappeared. Tang Wan's pupils contracted, it all disappeared. Ji Yan nodded, cleverly saying. If the marshal gets angry, the results are devastating. How much that would be destroyed depends on his mood. Now, it's obvious that he's furious. He's so angry that he destroyed the entire abandoned distribution depot. There's not a trace of it left. Tang Wan sighed quietly. It didn't matter if it was destroyed, he was only worried about Zhong He. Reveal. Only when you didn't quite expect it. Chapter 49.2 You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Callous Editor. Walker. Although he only anxiously waited for 3 minutes, Tang Wan truly felt like every second was as long as a year. Terrified and on edge, he watched the door of the back cabin until the door opened once again. Zhong He's frame appeared in the doorway, still dragging a person with one hand. Just as Tang Wan was about to happily exclaim, he saw Zhong He fling the person to the ground like he was brushing away mud. The other groaned, proving that they were still alive. Zhong He. Tang Wan saw the blood on his body and his heart seized. He pulled at his seatbelt, he couldn't feel its parts clearly and couldn't open it. Ji Yan quickly unbuckled the seatbelt. Tang Wan stood up and nervously ran over. He wasn't expecting to still be dizzy from being rolled around. Before he could take 2 steps, his head throbbed. He immediately bumped into the steel plate beside him. Zhong He dodged to catch Tang Wan and held him tightly in his arms. When he looked at the man in his embrace again, he noticed that he had already stained Tang Wan's clothes with blood. Zhong He furrowed his eyebrows and upset flashed through his eyes. He wordlessly took the towel that Ji Yan offered him, wanting to wipe Tang Wan dry. However, the more he wiped, the dirtier he got. Zhong He's expression darkened. Tang Wan sensed the other's intentions, and the corners of his lips curved up slightly. It's all right, we can just go home and wash it off. Zhong He released him and wiped his hands clean. He very carefully maintained his distance from Tang Wan. Tang Wan pursed his lips and reached out to grasp Zhong He's hand. The scent can't be wiped off. It'll be all right when we go home and wash it off. I don't have a cat's sense of smell, so I can't smell it. Zhong He lifted his gaze and his golden eyes stared into Tang Wan's smiling gaze. He noticed that the other wasn't afraid of or trying to avoid him. Only then did he toss the towel back. The fighter aircraft once again reverted to its standard aircraft form, and the lounge became much more spacious. Zhong He sat opposite to Tang Wan and wordlessly took the initiative to tightly grasp Tang Wan's hand. Tang was still in a state of shock. He only realized afterward that he had just experienced an assassination attempt. He had almost reached the gates of hell once again. He had also been shaken around the aircraft so many times that he didn't even have the energy to curse or speak. The pair sat quietly like this, the atmosphere incredibly awkward. Ji Yan examined the person Zhong He had brought back. He spoke, breaking the awkward atmosphere. This is a person who has undergone specialized training, but not from the army. Who sent them? Zhong He coldly said. If they were after me, they wouldn't have sent such few people. Tang Wan snapped out of it. He pointed at himself, could it be that they're after me? Zhong He remained silent, his gaze becoming colder. Seeing Zhong He like this, Tang Wan returned to his senses. Zhong He, are you really Dr. Zhuang? Zhong He's expression shifted and he faintly uttered and then. The atmosphere became even more awkward. Grieved, Tang Wan lay down. The De Zhuang he had eaten, slept, and bathed with, the De Zhuang he had carried in his embrace like a child, the De Zhuang he had rubbed until he was a ball of fur, the De Zhuang who was so weak that he could barely jump had unexpectedly turned into a partner who was a killing god. When Tang Wan thought it over, it was no wonder that he had never seen De Zhuang and Zhong He together and the two looked so similar. He had even wondered if De Zhuang was Zhong He's illegitimate child. How could he have never thought that De Zhuang was just Zhong He transformed? Lin Bo had clearly said before that De Zhuang's spiritual strength was unstable and was cultivating his spirit. At the time, the person who was cultivating their spirit was Zhong He. His spiritual strength wasn't stable enough, so he had shifted into a juvenile form. No wonder Zhong He hadn't wanted to divorce him the moment he opened his eyes, not even letting him leave. No wonder Zhong He knew him so well. Tang Wan was crushed and he used a pillow to cover his face. He had the heart to cry, but he no longer had a child. I must be dreaming. Tang Wan only spoke after a long time, his voice muffled. Zhong He remained silent for a while, and, I also hope that you are. The couple once again sank into an awkward silence. Tang Wan immersed himself in the feeling of his child being gone. Zhong He was immersed in the embarrassment of not knowing how to explain himself, and killing off Tang Wan's enemies. He didn't utter a word for the entire ride home. Only when the aircraft reached the apron did Zhong He stand up. He expressionlessly picked Tang Wan, who was still despondent, up by the waist and carried him. Tang Wan opened his eyes and struggled, wanting to be let down. I can walk by myself. Zhong He despotically loosened his grip. You're not comfortable. It's a lot better, I don't have an incurable disease. Zhong He still didn't allow for an explanation, carrying Tang Wan down from the aircraft. Lin Bo saw that the pair was covered in blood and anxiously ran over. The old man ran so fast that it seemed like he was flying. Who was injured? Zhong He shook his head. No one. He's dizzy, let Qi Ximing look at him. Tang Wan rubbed his throbbing head and reluctantly admitted. Search for what doctor? I have a healing ability. Zhong He was unhappy. Your all-purpose ability doesn't heal very well. Tang Wan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. You were even more anxious than I was. Zhong He carried him to the treatment room. Of course, I care more about you than you do. That tone was not at all unpleasant to hear, and Tang Wan's heart warmed. The big cat was uncomfortable with other things. But when it came to liking him, he was never uncomfortable. After Dr. Qi finished examining Tang Wan, he said, disheartened. He had been frightened and had been intensely shaken. I can prescribe some calming medicine, and he'll be okay after some rest. To a military doctor like Dr. Qi, this type of problem didn't need to be medically treated at all. It would be a waste of time and resources. Actually, they should be examining Zhong He right now. Had the marshal regressed after using his spiritual strength? After all, it was the first time he had used so much of his spiritual strength after he recovered. Then, Dr. Qi saw the marshal carefully carry his partner so he could take him to rest. Dr. Qi quieted. He could already determine from the marshal's facial expression. There wasn't anything wrong with him, he had made a full recovery. Tang Wan's emotions eventually stabilized after he was laying on the bed. He saw Zhong He grab some clothes to go shower. Tang Wan, who had finally calmed down, thought of losing the child he had raised for a year, and rose from the bed, distressed. He pulled out Zhong He's clothes from the wardrobe and balled them up on the bed. Damn it! This big cat had unexpectedly never said anything, not even a word of explanation. He even calmly went to shower. When Zhong He came back from his shower, he was hit in the face with a ball of cloth that Tang Wan had thrown. Tang Wan didn't give any explanations and pushed Zhong He out the door. He angrily pointed 2 fingers at the other. 1. You got rid of my child. 2. When you got rid of my child you didn't even give me an explanation. What kind of attitude do you have? Go reflect on your actions, otherwise, you would have no way to return. Zhong He blankly held the bundle Tang Wan had tossed at him. He didn't understand what Tang Wan meant. Go. Don't come back until you've thought up a good explanation. Tang Wan angrily slammed the door, turned several locks, and quickly changed the password. Zhong He stood there with the bundle for a full 10 seconds. When he finally reacted, he realized that he had been kicked out of the bedroom by his partner. The marshal's face suddenly darkened. With a cold expression, he pressed the switch, only for the system to remind him. Permission has been changed. Zhong He's entire body stiffened and he stared at the door. He strove to stamp down the urge to hit the door with a paw. He opened his communications device. It was the first time he was so unsure of what to say. Can't we just give birth to another identical one? Tang Wan only sent back an emoticon, Shen Zhu Gu with an aloof face. Toy. Could it be identical? He wasn't one to begin with. It was an attitude problem, attitude. Was there any meaning in hiding it from him for so long? Marshal. Lin Bo, who was standing at the bend of the head of the stairs, silently saw everything and waved, come to the study, I swapped in a new sofa for you. Think about it. Zhong He. Zhong He, who was living in the study, had a belly full of fire and went to investigate everything. I want to know who was acting behind the scenes. When his subordinates saw that he was so angry, they didn't dare to ask any more questions. They simply took the man he had brought back with him to interrogate, and answers were quickly revealed. Major General Lienya, who was in charge of information and intelligence, personally reported. This is a group of illegal mercenaries. They would do anything as long as they were paid. Lienya was stone-faced and his words were meticulous. He was responsible for collecting intelligence. He was supposed to report it without the slightest amount of bias. How it was interpreted and settled wasn't within his responsibilities. Zhong He angrily said. In such an age, how can there be such an organization? They've been uprooted. As one of Zhong He's 4 major deputies, Lienya had followed Zhong He for many years, so his words weren't limited by their positions. He directly reminded. Marshal, this type of thing isn't under our Imperial Army's control. The ones we fight against are outside forces. Murderers, gangsters, perverts, and hired mercenaries are under the public security forces. Zhong He said indifferently. Then ask Luo Wei if he can take care of it. If he can't, then he can just shut up. Lienya listened on with a cold expression, then called Luo Wei directly. With a frigid stare, Deputy Lien asked. Our boss was attacked by hired mercenaries when he went out. The boss asked if you would handle it. If you won't, he'll handle it himself. The other leisurely, delightedly said. The marshal can just investigate it. If you want to use our place, we'll give our full cooperation. After Lienya closed the communicator, he grimly kept the recording as evidence. I'll let Mervyn handle catching and arresting them. I'll give you the detailed information as soon as I can. Zhong He nodded. You've gone through a lot of trouble. Lienya looked at the big cloth bundle on Zhong He's sofa, and there was finally a trace of emotion on his blank face. The marshal has also gone through a lot of trouble. Zhong He. It was natural that Tang Wan wouldn't cook dinner. Zhong He had become accustomed to eating Tang Wan's food. He had always said that he wasn't a picky eater, but after a few bites of his home chef's food, he wouldn't eat more than a few bites. Did he eat? Lin Bo doubtfully asked. Who? Zhong He pointed upstairs with a calm face. Oh. Lin Bo suddenly realized, you were talking about Furen. You can ask him yourself, you're a couple. As an old man, what do I know? Zhong He put down his chopsticks, went upstairs, and rang the bedroom's bell. Carrying a bowl of soup, Ji Yan just so happened to arrive. Seeing Zhong He, he hesitated for a moment, wanting to go back. Zhong He coughed and awkwardly said. Come back here. Ji Yan obediently went over. With the couple arguing, he didn't know what he was called over for. Tang Wan had been sleeping all this time. After showering, he called out Jin Xiaopang and Mulan. He had one in his arms and one on his head. There were traces of Zhong He sleeping on the bed, so he slept very soundly. After sleeping for 2 hours, when he almost had his fill of sleep, Tang Wan awoke when he heard the bell. He casually pressed the intercom above the bed. Who? Zhong He solemnly pointed at Ji Yan. Ji Yan tactfully replied. Furen, come up and drink some soup. And you can sleep more at night. Tang Wan mutedly answered. The door is open. Come in. Zhong He took the soup from Ji Yan's hands, pushed open the door, entered, and closed the door behind him, leaving Ji Yan outside. Ji Yan. Ah, poor Ji Yan. Chapter CH 50.1. Just what happened that year. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Callous Editor. Walker. The moment Tang Wan heard that there was something off with the footsteps, he quickly sat up. He saw that it was Zhong He, then snorted, in a bad mood. He had originally wanted to get up, but he pointedly lay back down again. He pulled the 2 cats into his arm and continued to sleep. Zhong He sat beside the bed and poked Tang Wan's back. The 2 cats sniffed out the scent beside his body, quickly jumped out of Tang Wan's arms, climbed up the windowsill, and hid. Even Jin Xiaopang's movements were very agile. Tang Wan hugged the pillow tightly. He didn't want to talk to the person behind him. It was the first time that he had put aside his pride to talk to a person. Is it still hard to bear? Tang Wan cocked his head slightly, still not wanting to make a sound. He poked him again. You're still scared today. Tang Wan sullenly pursed his lips. His heart softened a little from He's coaxing. He should be the first person to see He like this. Truthfully, he was a little happy. He saw that Tang Wan was still ignoring him, and he had no choice but to poke him again. I wanted to tell you, but there wasn't enough time. Tang Wan humphed unhappily. Nonsense, there were clearly many opportunities for you to say it. You just never did. Was it very fun to trick me? He's expression darkened. There was nothing he could say. Tang Wan turned over and looked into He's eyes. Didn't you just want face? You feel that telling me that you can only shift into a little weak milk cat would make you lose face, is that right? He's eyes brightened and he quickly nodded. Tang Wan angrily rolled his eyes. Then did you think about how I felt when I raised you as a son? Now my son is gone, how will you compensate me? Have you thought about my psychological gap? I can't see De Zhuang anymore. He took a deep breath and looked at Tang Wan's chattering mouth. How could he put it in a manner that seemed reasonable? He really couldn't get his point across. Then what do you say we should do? Tang Wan was speechless. He was just angry, but he hadn't actually want to do anything to He just wanted him to sincerely apologize and to know that he wouldn't conceal anything from him in the future. After all, they weren't originally familiar and he had wanted a divorce. He also had no choice but to shift into such a form. He hadn't trusted him at that time and so didn't tell him the truth. He was angry because their feelings had already developed very well, but he still kept it from him. This made his heart feel choked up. Adding on the face that he could no longer see De Zhuang, Tang Wan found it hard to bear. He asked. If you don't know what we should do, why are you still angry? Tang Wan was so angered that he immediately sat up. What kind of reasoning was this? He's eyes were very solemn. He truly felt that if he didn't know what to do, then he shouldn't be angry. Whenever a course of action was undertaken, the target must be clear. This had always been a marshal's combat norm. If there was no target, then there would be no action. His gaze towards Tang Wan was tolerant, as if he was telling him to sit up, that he was above average, and that he was reasonable. Tang Wan had nothing to say. From what you're saying, I'm in the wrong because I'm angry. He's expression sank. If you want to settle accounts with me, then I also want to settle accounts with you as well. Tang Wan angrily asked. You settle it then, you still have the face to count. Isn't this one of those trivial matters that leads to divorce? He stood up and placed one knee on the bed, his entire upper body looming over the other. He looked down at Tang Wan and asked him especially carefully. Whose daddy are you? How many times have you asked me to call you daddy? Do you still remember? Tang Wan was scared by the other side's movement and craned his neck backwards, his lofty manner instantly halved. Can you sit down properly when you speak? He thought of when Tang Wan had pressed him to the bed to keep him from moving and forced him to obediently admit his wrongs and call him daddy. He became even tougher than he was before. You can sit down after I finish speaking. Tang Wan nervously pushed the person on top of him and discovered that he couldn't be moved. He once again adopted a lofty manner. I can only take you as a child when you turned into a little milk cat. When you like this now, even if you called me daddy, I won't acknowledge it. With a calm expression, he directly pushed Tang Wan down, flipped him over, and pressed down on his back. When you press down on me like this, I didn't get angry, but you're angry with me now. Tang Wan angrily beat the pillow. You're here purely to take revenge against me. Feeling the restless hands on his body, Tang Wan immediately blushed. He really had rubbed De Zhuang like this. But before, De Zhuang was a clumsy child. It definitely hadn't been this erotic. Didn't you not call me daddy? Tang Wan flushed, already not daring to continue arguing about the Dezhuang problem. He felt that he had already been served up as a light refreshment on the other's platter, the kind that could be eaten at any moment. I'll call you Daddy, all right. Daddy, please let me go. Zong he hadn't expected Tang Wan to behave like this. He was speechless. His stiff hand pressed into his shoulder, where there wasn't any place to put his claws. Tang Wan wasn't a person like Zong He, who regarded face as the most important thing. Anyways, we'll settle matters tonight. I say, whatever animosity is left, we'll solve it together. You made me lose a son, so that's the final matter. Business people never suffered losses, they always reminded the other to recognize their own mistakes. As for the loss of the son, Zong He truly had no explanation. Originally, he was still a little angry, but since they were like this now, the atmosphere had changed. Zong He simply pulled himself closer to Tang Wan and kissed his ear. I'll repay you with an exact copy. Tang Wan was still unhappy. No, the child can follow in my footsteps. They'll be human, hairless, and bald. Zong He couldn't convince him, so he remained silent. Tang Wan had another reason. You didn't call me Daddy and I called you Daddy, but I still lost my son. Don't you owe me now? You still haven't repented, so what did you return for? From those words, Zong He had to bite his lip to stop himself from talking. He angrily flipped Tang Wan over and simply kissed him. Tang Wan was instantly silenced. Force was his weak point, it didn't matter even if his mouth was more nimble. After the long kiss, Tang Wan unhappily stared at the person above him. So this was a soldier's style. If he couldn't talk it through, then he'd use kisses. Could it be negotiated? Zong He leaned closer to kiss him again and reluctantly parted. I don't want to sleep in the study. Tang Wan was amused. Seeing the marshal look so wronged, a large portion of his anger dissipated. He sighed, will you still regard face as the most important thing in the future? Have you been reformed? Zong He leaned over to kiss the corner of Tang Wan's lips, solemnly promising. Reformed. Tang Wan stared at him for a while. Only when he saw the promise in his eyes did he laugh. Just knowing your wrongs is fine. Can you get off of me first? It's hard to breathe when you press down on my like this. You'll get used to it with more exercise. Originally, it didn't have any other meaning. Where couldn't they exercise? Soldiers were simply this straightforward. However, they hadn't thought that the meaning would change in such a situation. Tang Wan blushed, silently watching Zong He play a rogue in such an earnest manner. Zong He was also aware of the ambiguity in his words. They looked at each other for a few seconds. Zong He kissed him again. Not only did he not have to sleep in the study, he had done what he ought to do. Tang Wan subconsciously struggled a few more times. When he could break away, there was nothing left he could do. He might as well simply steal his heart. If he was going to do it, then just do it. They had been married for so long, could he remain pure for a lifetime? Their relationship was strong. When they were about to take advantage of the situation for their own benefit, they heard an unexpected bang on the desk followed by a cat's screech. Tang Wan's heart jumped. Jin Xiaopang. Terrified, Jin Xiaopang shrank under the table, wrapping its arms around its tail and licking the fur. It looked at the soup it had pushed over onto the ground, and it couldn't help but reach out with a paw. It licked, and smacked its lips after it finished licking. It was reluctant to part with the soup. Tang Wan looked at Zong He's gaze, which was filled with unfulfilled desires, and smothered a smile. For this bowl of soup, if it wasn't cleaning it up, then it wasn't interested. Zong He grudgingly sat back up. At this time, Lin Bo came to knock on the door. It's so early, they shouldn't have fallen asleep yet. Marshal, Major General Gu has arrived. Zong He pinched Tang Wan's face unhappily. In a moment, I'll. You don't have to come back. Tang Wan had calmed down now and coolly spoke. I think it would be better for you to go back to your study so you can deepen your impression. Right, I can't just let you off so easily. I'm a principled person. Zong he. Dot. Things were getting spicy, degree. Chapter 50.2 You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Callous editor. Walker, this time, we have gotten to the bottom of all the problems. It pertains to the royal family, so it would be better for us to keep it quiet. I'm afraid that a message would be intercepted, so I came in person. The young man in his 30s with a steady temperament didn't have the sharp edges or grumpiness of a soldier but smiled when he spoke. He didn't speak too quickly or too slowly, and he was wearing a rankless military uniform while sitting in Zong He's study. When he saw Zong He coming, he didn't stand up. I didn't know that this identity had pulled so much along. Duke Tang had really taken a fancy to the family inheritance. I didn't even suspect that he dared to do such things to protect the Tang family's 300 years of honor. Furen has truly suffered. Gu Yenkai only continued speaking when he saw that Zong He had closed the door. Tang Wan, formerly known as Tang Yu, was ranked first among the nobles because of his S.-ranked spiritual strength when he was 6 years old. In addition to the rich cultural heritage of the Tang family, he was also named the Crown Princess. Bo of Zong He expression was cold, he had already known about this. Gu Yenkai sighed with regret. It was originally a perfect life that others envied and admired. However, his mother passed away when he was 7 years old. His brother Tang Tinji was only 2 years old, and misfortune fell on the two brothers. Duke Tang had been raising a little lover outside, which was nothing new among the nobles. There were many people who had other lovers. Unfortunately, this lover was the daughter of the woman that housekeeper Tang Lien had abandoned when he was young. Using Tang Lien's guilt, the little lover quietly gave birth to a son for Duke Tang under Tang Lien's protection. His spiritual strength had also been inherited from the Tang family's talent. He had been born in S. rank. When Gu Yenkai reached this point, he couldn't help but laugh. Later, things became much more interesting. After the original Lady Tang's death, Duke Tang brought the little lover home. Because of his high spiritual strength, the second young master was also recognized by Duke Tang. For nobles, it wasn't inexcusable. The new Lady Tang took Tang Yu and Tang Tinji as her own and cared for them. Duke Tang was very satisfied. Interestingly, the eldest young master Tang Yu's spiritual strength became increasingly weak. He gradually became a useless person. In order to preserve the Tang family's engagement and their several hundred years of honor, Duke Tang decided to allow the second eldest child to replace the eldest. He shut up Tang Yu in the rear court, saying that he couldn't see people because of a serious illness. He didn't see anyone for half a year. They used cosmetic technology to make the second eldest, who was the same age as Tang Yu, look like him. He took his place in the eldest's life. Zong He's expression became more unsightly. He had discovered this before, but it hadn't been this detailed. Continue. After that, the real Tang Yu was locked up. Duke Tang told everyone that his second son was dead, so he had one less son. Actually, this situation hadn't been handled well. It would have been perfect to conceal the existence of the second son in the beginning. However, she could only make a fuss about her son's talent in order to enter the Tang family. At that time, the reason that no one had discovered the counterfeit was because the children were young and looked similar. They could also claim that his memory loss was caused by the illness. The second eldest didn't need to remember anyone else, he only needed to remember the playmate he had seen once, the crown prince who was barely 7 years old. When he listened to Gu Yenkai, Zong He's eyes furrowed. Where did he go afterward? Who created a fake identity for him? This is also very interesting. His younger brother Tang Tinji, the little duke, is very shrewd. He saw Tang Yu get locked up. At the time, he was only 3 years old. The child's retainer had also been killed to keep the secret. Then, he knew that if he ever spoke about this, his father wouldn't spare him. So, He didn't dare cry out for help and didn't seek out his maternal grandfather. He played cute to curry favor with his stepmother, treating his fake brother as his true older brother. He slowly collected the family's power. Now, he's 16 years old and controls the entire Tang family behind the scenes. The most ferocious thing is that he controls 70% of the Tang family's business network. Gu Yenkai very much admired Tang Tinji's manner. He smiled, he was the one who helped Tang Yu escape, and had secretly taught him those means of self-protection. Tang Tinji originally sent him to a remote planet for shelter, renamed him Tang Wan, and had planned to retrieve him once he controlled the Tang family. The more Gu Yenkai spoke, the more he felt that Tang Tinji was a true talent. With Tang Tinji's schemes, it's a shame that he's a noble. He'd be a military genius or a successful politician. Zhong He's expression remained cold, perhaps he would become a warmonger. Gu Yenkai paused. True, this child had been suppressed for a long time, and is a bit bloodthirsty. What I want to know now is that Tang Lian is looking for someone to kill Tang Wan, so does he know? Zhong He scoffed, that little thing. Pfft. He should be aware. Not reporting it to you in advance, this child has quite the nerve. Gu Yenkai laughed. He's testing to see if you have the ability to protect his brother. With a cold expression, Zhong He picked up the intelligence report. Gu Yenkai continued. Though Tang Tinji's schemes run deep, he's only a teenager. He hadn't thought that Tang Yu's luck would be so bad. While he was being evacuated, he encountered star pirates and disappeared. Even the signal couldn't be found. I suspected that the identity signal is Tang Yu's, which was erased by Tang Wan before he lost his memory. He didn't want to be involved with the Tang family anymore or implicate his younger brother. So like this, not even Tang Tinji could find him. With his shooting technique, he wouldn't have any problems with self-preservation. At the moment, Lin Bo knocked on the door and brought in a bowl of noodles. Gu Yenkai quickly stood up and received it personally. Thank you, Lin Bo. Zhong He opened his own communications device. When Gu Yenkai sat back down, he called someone. Mervin, come with me. Gu Yenkai had just picked up his chopsticks, but when he heard Zhong He's words, he stopped his movement. What did you call Mervin for this evening? It's like he has rabies, he's going crazy these days. He wants to bite whoever he meets. Zhong He closed the communications device and calmly replied, we're taking a walk around Duke Tang's house. Hey! Gu Yenkai quickly stood up, this is about the prestige of the imperial family. I only ran here because I didn't want this matter to leak out. If you go, wouldn't it just be like telling the imperial family about the Tang family's ploy? The Duke didn't have a hand in hiring those assassins, nor did he know about the poison. Can you calm down a bit? Zhong He had already picked up the military overcoat hanging on the coat rack. I'm already relying on the darkness of the night, when no one is paying attention. You're bringing soldiers in at night and personally paying them a visit at this time of the night. Gu Yenkai didn't know whether to laugh or cry. If I didn't know better, I'd think you were raiding a house. Zhong He put on his overcoat, pulled out his military ranking pin from his pocket, and fastened it on his shoulder. His expression was cold and his voice was frigid. My partner had been bullied like this. If I don't go and stir up some trouble, then I'm not a man. Gu Yenkai was left speechless by these words. He looked at the noodles on the table. Then he quickly took a few mouthfuls, then tilted the rest of the bowl's contents into his mouth. All the while, he was walking down the hall, with one bowl of noodles completely eaten. A soldier's eating speed was also very fast. After Tang Wan cleaned up the soup and walked out, he saw that Zhong He was preparing to leave. It was in the evening, and he was wearing an official military uniform. He had even put on his epaulette. He looked like he was going out on a military campaign. Tang Wan nervously asked. What happened? Zhong He stepped in and returned from the aircraft. I'm going out for something, not a battle. Don't worry. Tang Wan obediently nodded. thinking that Zhong He was comforting him, then take care of your safety. Zhong He's expression was gentle. It's really nothing. There's a report that's related to you on my desk. You can go take a look at it. Tang Wan cocked his head slightly. You're not going out to vent for me. I was very miserable before, right? From Zhong He's gaze, he could see that he had guessed correctly. Then I'll be troubling you, the Zhuang's uncle. Tang Wan stifled his mischievous laughter. He couldn't help but tease him. He hadn't planned to stop Zhong He. He believed that the marshal wouldn't impulsively do something unreasonable. Since he wanted to go, he'd let him go. If there were any consequences, they could bear it together. The corners of Zhong He's lips lifted up, and he lightly scratched Tang Wan's nose. Smart. Tang Wan smiled and his eyes curved. You're praising me. He walked with Zhong He to the aircraft. After he watched the other leave, Tang Wan went to Zhong He's study. Normally, the door remained closed. Tang Wan looked at the handprint pad, hesitated for a moment, then placed his palm on it. After he was verified, the corner of Tang Wan's lips curled up. Sure enough, Zhong He had given him special privileges. After he grabbed the report on the desk, he sat down in Zhong He's chair and slowly read it over. After he finished reading it, Tang Wan calmly and quietly sat for half an hour. Then he sighed heavily and called for Ji Yen. I need to go to Duke Tang's residence. He hadn't expected that the original would have been so miserable. There were some things that he needed to face himself. He didn't need Zhong He to protect him so much. There wasn't anything that he wasn't brave enough to face. At 10 o'clock in the evening, Duke Tang, who was in his 60s, was lying down. The current housekeeper suddenly came to report to him. Duke, the marshal has arrived. He wants to see you. Zhong He. Tang Jinshi frowned and sat up. Why did he suddenly come to see me at such a late time? Tang Jinshi didn't know why, but he had an uneasy feeling in his heart. He couldn't discover who the officer with Tang Wan was. There must have been a person from within who had interfered. Could it be Zhong He's doing? Zhong He coldly stood in the middle of the large hall. There stood two people behind him, one on the left and one on the right. One had dark hair and eyes, gentle and refined. He seemed harmless. The other had short white hair and violet eyes, unlike a normal person's. They were pretty but cold, as if they were staring at a dead creature, making people tremble with fear. He was a fighting demon under Zhong He's command, the captain of the Special Forces, the Imperial Army's sharpest dagger. Major General Mervyn Gabriel. There would be bloodshed and death wherever he appeared. As soon as Tang Jinshi saw him, his expression sobered. Truthfully, no one wanted to see Mervyn Gabriel's violet eyes. Towards Zhong He, Duke Tang was polite. I don't know why the marshal came over so late. Please sit down. Major Generals, please sit. Zhong He expressionlessly sat down, not looking at the other. He felt that it was beneath him to talk to him. After what the other had done, not simply beating him up was already showing a lot of restraint. After all, if others heard that he beat up his father. In law, it wouldn't reflect well. Gu Yankai smiled and said. We're sorry to disturb the Duke's rest this late at night, but it can't be helped. Someone tried to assassinate the Marshal and Furin today in broad daylight. We investigated and found that it has something to do with your Duke's residence. The Marshal just wanted to come and ask about it. When Tang Jinshi heard the word assassin, his gaze sharpened, but he calmly replied. Related to the Duke's residence. Then that must be well investigated. Zhong He scornfully snorted, bring them out. In the blink of an eye, a soldier in a special black combat outfit brought a person along into the hall, let them fall to the floor, and then pressed a foot onto their neck. Seeing the person on the ground, Tang Jinshi pupils shrank and his expression froze. What does the marshal mean? The one pressed to the ground was his old housekeeper, Tang Lian. Zhong He's gaze was cold. The Duchess allied with her father and hired a person to kill my partner. The Duke should know what kind of crime this is. Duke Tang didn't understand. Your partner? Mervyn, who was standing behind Zhong He, unforgivingly asked. You don't secretly keep track of who you want to kill. Is Lady Tang going to come out by herself, or should I go catch her? As he spoke, Mervyn had already stroked the dagger on his waist out of habit. He didn't care if they were male or female. In his eyes, there were only three kinds of people. Alive, dead, and comrades. Duke Tang's expression soured. My wife has a gentle temperament. She has no enmity with the marshal's wife, how could she hire an assassin? I'm afraid there's some kind of misunderstanding here. Zhong He was disinclined to explain, only because the evidence was right in front of them. Gu Yankai beamed. First, Duke Tang, don't be afraid. You probably wouldn't know about the relationship between your old housekeeper and your wife. Tang Lian, formerly known as Li Ku, is your wife Li Mo's biological father. Duke Tang's cold gaze towards Tang Lian was met with bitter eyes. He already didn't need to ask any further, is Tang the marshal's wife's surname? Zhong He wouldn't press charges against him for no reason. Having reached this point, he knew who the person Tang Lian wanted to kill was. Since Zhong He had chosen this time, he didn't want to make it public that the original crown princess had become the marshal's wife. It would be difficult for Zhong He to behave with integrity if such a thing came out. So, Duke Tang thought that he had managed to grasp onto Zhong He's weakness. He calmly spoke. Uncle Lian, what kind of illegal business did you want to do on your daughter's behalf? Duke, don't worry. You can't just push all of the responsibility onto the old housekeeper with such few words. Isn't he also your father? Law. What your wife did was even more provoking. Gu Yenkai's expression also chilled. This father didn't care if his son was dead or alive. He washed away his wife's injustices first, even pushing all of the guilt to the old housekeeper. His heart really was cruel. Zhong He's gaze had already filled with murderous intent. Today, I'll set all of the matters straight. Invite Lady Tang up here for me. Oh, confrontation time, Omega. Chapter CH 51.1. I wish you a long life of loneliness. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Callous Editor. Walker. Two female soldiers ushered Lady Tang in without a trace of politeness. Although they didn't step on her feet as the others did, they still pressed her onto a chair with one soldier on each side so she couldn't move. Seeing her father on the ground, the look in Lady Tang's eyes didn't change at all. Her gaze only lightly swept over him before she turned her head to look at Duke Tang, confused. What's going on here? Now that he knew the relationship between Tang Lian and his wife, Duke Tang felt a burst of indescribable chill in his wife's eyes. Gu Yankai placed all of the evidence in front of Duke Tang on a large three-dimensional screen. It even included images of the interrogation. There was simply no need for him to ask anything, nor was there a need for them to listen to their objections. All the evidence was here. If they understand, then their eyes were lame and heads empty. As he watched, Duke Tang's expression became colder and colder. He was stunned, his heart like a torrential sea. He found out that he hadn't understood his wife at all. She had not only concealed her past history, but had also turned Tang Yu into a useless person by herself, ruining his life. He had unexpectedly been married to this snake and scorpion woman for 10 years. Duke, this is slander. Before the Duchess had finished speaking, a female soldier suddenly attacked. In a split second, she dislocated the other's chin. Her hand was unwavering, and her eyes unblinking. Tang Lian, who had already been laying still on the ground, started frantically struggling again, angrily glaring at the female soldier. It could be seen that Tang Lian truly cared for Lady Tang, his daughter, but it wasn't clear if Lady Tang had any sort of feelings for her father. Duke Tang looked at the father and daughter with an unsightly expression. He had pampered her so much before, but now he was bitterly disappointed. He didn't like things that he couldn't control. The person he had always thought was his most intimate partner had actually done so many things behind his back. This feeling of betrayal was unbearable to Duke Tang. He glanced at Duke Tang's expression and taunted. Actually, you didn't want to keep him either. Duke Tang's expression was taut and he crumpled onto the chair. His voice was feeble. No, a tiger, though cruel, will not devour its own child. In the end, he's still my son. He didn't give him the slightest bit of mercy. He stood up, his voice cold, then shouldn't you know what's best to do? However, you all will have nothing to do with him in the future. When you see him from now on, respectfully call him the Marshal's Furen. You should bow your head. The two dukes were different. He's father was a duke so he could inherit the title. His mother was still a princess and he was also the emperor's cousin. He was truly related to the imperial family. The glory that the Tang family had held onto for many years was also given to them by the imperial family and had to bow to them. Although Duke Tang's expression was calm, the fingers gripping the armrest tightly had turned white. His face was white, looking like he had aged a good number of years. In the short span of half an hour, the gentle and tender dreamland he had built for more than 20 years, as well as half of the family, had been destroyed. Even if his temperament was even firmer, such a huge gap was unbearable. Under He's forceful eyes, Duke Tang finally spoke, then we can shut Lady Tang away, so she can reflect on her past mistakes. He coldly snorted, not satisfied at all with her only being locked up. At this time, a warm voice cut through the tense atmosphere, we should go home. Tang Wan stood at the entrance of the hall. He had a soft smile, and his gaze towards he was gentle. Seeing the other turn towards him, he laughed, let's go home, it's getting late. It's not good to run over and disturb other people's households. Duke Tang dazedly looked at Tang Wan, who was laughing in the doorway. Finally, he slowly stood up. Tang Wan didn't even look at him, let's go home. We have nothing to say to that scum. You. Duke Tang's face was flushed with anger from Tang Wan's words and a wave of fury rushed to his head. However, he choked back his words after being subjected to He's gaze. Tang Wan laughed coldly, saying with resentment, whatever preaching you have to do, save it for yourself. I won't be filial, I don't want to be filial towards you. Tang Wan stood outside the hallway, uncaring. I don't want to step foot on this place either. A bit of mud on my head makes me sick. It was here where I saw humanity's ugliest side. There isn't anything else I want to say. Duke Tang, I wish you a long life of loneliness. His last words couldn't be mistaken for being not poisonous. Duke Tang's body throbbed and he sat down heavily on the chair and covered his heaving chest, he couldn't breathe. His child. Wanting him to be lonely and still live a long life. Tang Wan looked at the subdued Lady Tang and Tang Lian and gave an indescribable laugh, Duke Tang truly has good fortune. Duke Tang's face turned white. Tang Wan's gaze was like a knife stabbing into his chest. Tang Wan didn't hate him, but abhorred him. It was as if he was looking at a disgusting bug. Duke Tang took a deep breath and forced himself to remain calm. Looking at Tang Wan's gaze, he also expressed his regrets, it's this father who hadn't fulfilled his responsibilities, you've been wrong. Tang Wan simply wanted to laugh, if my partner wasn't the Empire's marshal, Duke Tang would have found someone to assassinate me, right? Your hidden matters are exposed and your glory is ruined. Since it's gotten to this point, I'll just say that I wish you a long life of 100 years, so that you live alone when you grow old. Let's go home. What else do you have to say to this deceitful, scummy bastard? Duke Tang's face almost went purple in his fury. To think that as a noble, he had raised a son that could scold his father. The most crucial thing was that he couldn't refute any of his words. He was so suffocated that he wanted to die. At this time, a set of rhythmic footsteps interrupted the stifling atmosphere. I'm sorry that I returned so late, and that I couldn't greet the guests. It is truly disrespectful. The voice was slightly soft and tender, but was already rather dignified. The insipid sentence had attracted the gazes of everyone in the hall. The youth was outfitted in traditional Chinese clothing. He had somehow already arrived at the doorway, only 3 steps away from Tang Wan. He said with a smile. Mother doesn't like to live here. I have already prepared a room in the rear mountains for her. Come, take mother to rest. Duke Tang looked at his young son's excessively courteous actions with cold eyes. Rear mountains. Tang Tinji had a gentle smile on his face. Yes, it's the place where my elder brother was once locked away. Don't worry, I won't poison her. At the worst, I'll place a beast in the middle of the night to frighten her. I want her to feel what it's like to be locked away for a dozen years. If not, the marshal won't be satisfied. Duke Tang looked at his youngest son with an unsightly expression. While his son was like this, he felt that he was being strange. The housekeeper was already unwilling to wait for Duke Tang's words and waved over 2 maids. The 2 maids came forward and forcefully pulled Lady Tang and dragged her away. Even if Lady Tang's chin was dislocated, she could still sob. She struggled in fear, and knew that there was no good end for her after she'd get dragged away. The only one who could give her an opportunity to live was Duke Tang. She only begged for the other to look upon their many years of marriage and mutual affection to save her. The maids were clearly trained and didn't give her a chance to resist. They simply used their abilities and carried her out like a little chick. You all. Duke Tang's pupils shrank as he looked at the housekeepers and maids' responses in astonishment. As soon as he wanted to block them, he was subjected to Zhong He's cold gaze, which was like an icy dagger. Suddenly, his entire body was stretched so taut that it ached slightly. Zhong He wanted to kill him. Duke Tang finally realized that Zhong He wasn't concerned about the imperial family knowing it all. He had come here today to simply settle matters. Ruined, Duke Tang sat down without a word. However, his gaze towards Tang Tinji became increasingly cold. This child was disobeying him. Just what had he concealed about himself? Tang Tinji narrowed his eyes and watched the maids drag Lady Tang out. The corners of his lips curled in satisfaction. He looked directly at his father and said mildly. In these past 2 years, father has also gotten old. As a son, I would naturally share the burden of a household. You ought to be tired, go back to rest. I will resolve these matters. Tinji. You. Duke Tang's complexion shifted from red to white, drained of blood. He tightly grasped the armrest and the hand concealed under his sleeves were shaking violently. He couldn't accept it, this son. The son he was most proud of had unexpectedly concealed so much. Tang Tinji shot Duke Tang a mocking glance. Lian Bo's gaze made Duke Tang's heart clench and his throat seize. He couldn't say a single word. Tang Tinji said indifferently. I recall that there is a law that states that those with a rank at or above Major General can directly sentence a person after ensuring that they have committed a serious crime. There is no need for a trial. Am I remembering correctly? Yes, a murderer pays with their life. Zhong He's lips twitched slightly. He had some good feelings for this daring child. Tang Tinji's lips curled up. He pulled a gun that only nobles could use from the waist of the retainer behind him. He smiled and aimed the gun at Tang Lian, who was on the ground, unable to resist. Tang Lian stiffened and he turned his head and trembled in fear. He wasn't afraid of dying, he had already prepared for his death beforehand. If his daughter wasn't locked up, then he could calmly face his fate. Now, however, he wanted to live. He needed to save his daughter, he couldn't die. Tang Tinji laughed lightly, and pulled the trigger against the other's despairing eyes. The gun emitted several bangs, shooting all of the bullets into the ground. Looking at the other's trembling and the hope for life in his eyes, Tang Tinji was in a very good mood. It would be better to let you keep your life. I want to see you lose your hope. It would be a shame to let you die without a struggle. Send the old housekeeper to the rear mountains. It's a good place for him to enjoy his retirement. Shut him away next to the wife, so that this father-daughter pair can take care of each other. Tang Wan looked at the youth's smile and suddenly remembered the words. Pulled to the rear mountains to be buried. The person who had said this was Tang Lian, but this child was the Xiao Yi from his dreams. Did he want to enact his revenge on that servant? While Tang Wan was thinking, the person beside him suddenly rushed over. Tang Wan didn't react, already being hugged tightly by the other. Tang Tinji had thrown his entire body into Tang Wan's arms, pulling him closer by the waist. He whispered. Gidge. Lady Tang finally gets what's coming to her, intersection Omega, superset of, vote here in CG's, belated, holiday art writing contest. Chapter 51.2 You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Callous Editor. Walker in the past moments, he looked more mature than his 16 years, but now, he seemed like a 6-year-old child. Tang Wan's heart suddenly thumped, as if he had been forcefully hit by something. Looking at the fluffy head on his shoulder, Tang Wan raised his hand and he gently touched the child's head. You are, Xiao Yi. The dream must have been a memory. Tang Tinji raised his head and uneasily looked into Tang Wan's eyes. Tang Wan said with a smile, I'm sorry, I've lost my memory. I've forgotten everything from before, but I remember a child named Xiao Yi. Is that you? Grieved, Tang Tinji held Tang Wan, unwilling to let go, just like a young child in need of comfort. He rubbed his head against Tang Wan's shoulder. Tang Wan could hardly breathe. Tang Wan couldn't bear to push him away. He didn't know if it was because of the memories left behind by the original, he truly wanted to get close to this youth. Tang Wan sighed lightly. Perhaps it was familial affection. The same blood flowed through their bodies. In the end, he was reluctant to let him go. With a few steps, Zhong-he approached the two. He raised his hand to grasp Tang Tinji's collar and lightly pulled him aside, like he was peeling off a piece of plaster. He shook Tang Tinji off. Let's go back home. Zhong-he pulled Tang Wan's hand so that they could leave. He had nothing to do with this family from then on. He believed that Tang Tinji could handle the rest of the situation. As soon as Tang Wan took a few steps, he heard Tang Tinji's anxious cry. K113, GE. Don't leave. Tang Wan looked back with a smile and waved at the aggrieved youth. Don't worry, I'm living a good life now. Don't be blinded by hatred. Because of this smile, Tang Tinji suddenly felt relieved. Gu Yenkai went towards the door. Little friend, for your older brother's honor, I'll give you a privilege. Gu Yenkai pulled over Major General Mervyn and said with a smile. Leave a few people here to ensure the little duke's safety. Major General Mervyn casually ordered a few people to do so and left with a chilly expression. There hadn't been any battles, so it was even more difficult for Major General Mervyn to bear. His murderous aura made the duke's guards shiver. Gu Yenkai chuckled and waved at Tang Tinji. If you're short on manpower in the future, you can ask us. We're of the same family, so you don't have to be polite. Tang Tinji watched the group quickly withdraw, his eyes narrowed with a smile. He looked Duke Tang, who was sitting in his chair and seemed as if he had been struck and aged a few years. Father, look. See how good the partner that Gidge found is. He has military power, and sent people to protect me. Aren't you very pleased? Duke Tang closed his eyes in despair. His eldest son hated him, didn't recognize him, and even cursed him out. His youngest son had made him a mere figurehead and wanted to control him. His wife and children had betrayed him, and almost abused his child to the point of death. In this household, everyone had revolved around him. He had been the omnipotent one, but unexpectedly, he had been the most ignorant one. Now, he was an old man who had been deserted by everyone. He had really become like what Tang Wan had said. A long, lonely life. It had become the most vicious curse. And he didn't know if he could hold on to the family inheritance he had cared the most about. His second child's position as the crown princess was in danger after Zhong He's fuss. Seeing his youngest son's manner, it would be impossible for his second son to keep his engagement with the imperial family. He had already lived the majority of his life, what was left? A long, lonely life. Duke Tang said this phrase word by word. His mind was filled with the image of Tang Wan looking at him with disgusted eyes, and his youngest son's taunting gaze. They were both thorns which were ruthlessly stabbed into his heart, so that he felt breathing was difficult. Time seemed to be at a standstill. After a long period of time, Duke Tang finally took a deep breath and a bit of his strength returned. He said with difficulty, "What do you want to do?" "It's very simple. Liemo shouldn't even think about leaving that room for the rest of her life. Tang Lian doesn't have many years left, so he can look on helplessly at his daughter. They can experience despair together. I won't kill them. I only want them to live in suffering, to be freed only in death. As for me, I'm a clean child and I won't do anything like killing people." Tang Tinji had a faint smile on his face, and innocuous told Duke Tang. "Father, Mother is very lonely in the cemetery. Do you want a small house in front of her grave to be built? You can accompany her for a while and conveniently confess. You haven't been a good husband or a good father. I think that she'll forgive you if you're sincere, you unfilial son." Duke Tang's complexion turned from white to red in anger. He picked up the cup of tea beside him and ruthlessly smashed at Tang Tinji. Tang Tinji's expression didn't change. The soldier next to him raised their hand and activated their ice ability. The cup and its contents fell onto the floor with a clatter. Tang Tinji's gaze was still gentle. "Originally, I didn't think they would move this quickly. In my plans, we would still have 2 years. I would only officially take over the Tang family when I turn 18. I would have never thought that my brother would be too capable, finding that partner that can support even me. Ah, life. There would be inevitably that many pleasant surprises waiting for you." In the end, Duke Tang couldn't fight it. Under the successive strikes, he fainted in anger. Tang Tinji's expression suddenly cooled, and he said coldly, "Find someone to take a look at him. Build a house besides Mother's grave and find time for him to move there. He must live a long life, so he can be with Mother. He isn't worthy of being buried with her even after 100 years." After Tang Tinji finished speaking, he looked towards the empty sky. Tang Wan's shadow had long since vanished. However, he knew that his older brother was living well, even if his sister-in-law was too powerful. He was in a rather bad mood. The next morning, Tang Wan groggily felt around with his hand. When he didn't feel the familiar presence, he suddenly realized that he had locked Zhong He in the study last night. Tang Wan sat up and laughed at himself. He had been accustomed to sleeping together, so he hadn't adapted to sleeping alone. Ji Yan entered the room and pulled aside the curtains. He had gathered some clothes for Tang Wan and handed over a moist towel. Early this morning the imperial nobles received these pieces of information. Lady Tang died suddenly of illness. In his despair, Duke Tang fell ill, and all of the family affairs were left to little Duke Tang Tinji. The crown princess Tang Yu was recalled home by the little duke. In order to care for his sick father, he took a temporary reprieve from school for 6 months. Tang Wan took the towel, and lay down to wipe his face. He doubtfully asked, "Is this piece of news real or fake? She really died?" Ji Yan obediently responded, "This is the news that the little duke released. We don't know whether it's true or not. If you want to know, I can find someone to go check." "No need." Tang Wan handed the towel back to Ji Yan and sat up. "It's not our family's business, so we won't pay it any attention." While Tang Wan was eating breakfast, Ji Yan carried over an invitation, the 2 characters, imperial family, shining and especially visible. Tang Wan. He has just sorted out his identity last night. Today, he had been invited to a meal by the imperial family. How could his heart feel so restless? Duke Tang got what he deserved too, subset of, Omega intersection. Chapter ch 52.1. I am simply the Marshal's wife. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Callous editor. Walker. After sleeping in his study for an entire night, Zhong He, who had been aching all over, went downstairs only to see a nervous Tang Wan. He said disapprovingly. You can go if you want to, and don't go if you don't want to. There's nothing to be worried about. Tang Wan was still worried. It's not good like this. The main point was to invite me to get to know Beta Ursi Minori's nobility. As a leading role, if I don't go, I won't be giving the Empress any face. Zhong He still kept his manner. There's nothing bad about that. The Empress isn't a narrow-minded person. Look at you. Tang Wan was at a loss. If I go this time, would all of the nobles recognize me? Zhong He suddenly changed his attitude. Then go. It would be a perfect time for you to announce your status and tell everyone that this is what the Marshal's wife looks like. You don't need to guess anymore. Tang Wan. You were married off to me when I was still a handicapped person. Don't we have a couple's deep feelings? Tang Wan was unhappy. I don't understand what you're trying to show off. Zhong He unyieldingly responded, humans truly are hard to understand. Tang Wan's lips twitched and his gaze was increasingly unhappy. I truly don't understand big cats. Little cats are better. Zhong He's expression chilled. Are you talking about De Zhuang again? Tang Wan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Don't be so sensitive, I didn't say anything. Tang Wan looked at Zhong He's solemn gaze and suddenly wanted to laugh. Pfft. You want to save face too much. I really didn't say anything. Zhong He angrily went downstairs. The more Tang Wan spoke, the more Zhong He felt that the person who was correct was himself. Tang Wan sighed. His old ancestors weren't lying. Big cats and little cats were hard to raise. Since he couldn't hide, he had to summon up the courage to participate. Ji Yan quickly hurried and went to prepare Tang Wan's formal attire for the dinner banquet, and Lin Bo gave him the gift he needed to bring. Tang Wan looked around again, but there was nothing he could help with. He simply summoned the kitten army and started a live broadcast. Come and pet them. For petting cats, it didn't matter what time it was, the audience wouldn't dislike it. At this time, a familiar ID popped out, and a row of rewards came flooding in. Tang Wan was shocked. Crazy Luo Bei, did you truly not make a mistake? How are you so enthusiastic today? Crazy Luo Bei. Not a mistake, Ga. I hope you're doing well. I'm giving you money so you can buy things for yourself. Tang Wan laughed. From this, he had truly misunderstood him. This child wasn't poor, but could earn a lot. I'm not your gauge. Wouldn't it be better for you to simply buy a gift for your Ga? Crazy Luo Bei. No, my G #K113, definitely wouldn't want it. It wouldn't be good for Tang Wan to meddle in others' personal affairs, then I can only accept it. Thank you for the rewards. After chatting with his fans for a while, Tang Wan logged off at noon and went to make lunch. Zhong He found him in the kitchen and saw that he had made a good number of dishes. He doubtfully asked. Your mood is unexpectedly so good. Tang Wan happily said. I was rewarded a lot of money by a nouveau riche this morning. I got rich, and I'm in a good mood, so I made more delicious things. Zhong He frowned, that they didn't have good intentions. Tang Wan placed the meat onto the pan. You're also jealous about this. Zhong He humphed, of course, those who dare to fool around with you will all be killed. Tang Wan rolled his eyes, jealous cat. In the afternoon, his clothing arrived. Tang Wan tried it on. This seemed like the army's formal attire, but it was unexpectedly made to fit his body well and the measurements were correct. The creamy white color paired well with his skin tone. This style was very fitting for someone's painting. Zhong He, who was standing next to him, reminded. The family members of soldiers can't dress like the nobles. We can't be informal. Tang Wan pursed his lips, so even the neck has to be bound so tightly. Zhong He's expression was solemn, yes. Tang Wan didn't have a choice. Okay, I'll listen to you. If this vinegary cat was put into a pot, he wouldn't need any seasoning to make a plate of sweet and sour cat. In the evening, Zhong He personally accompanied Tang Wan to the imperial palace. With Ji Yen by Tang Wan's side, he wouldn't be wronged. I'll find and speak to my cousin. After a while, I'll come pick you up. If you don't want to talk to them, you don't need to talk to them. I already told my cousin to not let you speak too much to those people. It's alright if you just sip some tea and eat some refreshments. Tang Wan took advantage of Ji Yen checking the environment outside to cup Zhong He's face and give him a quick kiss. Relax, I'm yours. Who dares to disrespect you? Zhong He raised his eyebrow. Mine. Tang Wan pinched the big cat's cheek. Yes, yours. Remember to pick me up later. I'm going. Zhong He watched Tang Wan leave. Suddenly, he wondered if Tang Wan had been hinting something. The matter of Zhong He's visit to the Duke's residence couldn't be concealed from the imperial family. On Beta Ursi Minoris, the imperial investigator wasn't a useless person. Zhong He concealed it from the empire's citizens and nobles, saving them a lot of trouble, and the imperial investigator didn't care at all about it. Zhong He looked forward to Duke Tang's misfortune. He almost strutted in and told the emperor. This is my partner, you took in a fake. In the morning, when she had discovered the reason for Zhong He's visit, the typically graceful and calm empress was furious. This engagement is cancelled. Using a fake to fool us for so many years, and that one is even born from an affair. The empress was actually a very generous person, the kind that could balance a bowl of water in her hands. Even if she couldn't see eye to eye with a child from an affair, if she had known before that Duke Tang was keeping a little lover outside, she would have had to rethink allowing the child to be the crown princess. Then the crown prince smiled consolingly. If we take the initiative to withdraw from the engagement, wouldn't it be telling everyone that we married a fake? Besides, could it be that you want me to fight with my uncle? I would die. The empress was teased by these words, and much of her anger dissipated. She wearily said. Tang Wan is already married. This type of thing can't be spread outside. There really needs to be a reason for cancelling the engagement. She looked at her nonchalant son. Do you like the crown princess? The crown prince laughed indifferently. Haha. The empress could tell that her son didn't like him. This engagement must be dissolved. How it would be dissolved would depend on how tactful the Tang family would be. That night, seeing Tang Wan enter the large banquet hall with a waiter showing the way, the empress did not go down. She stood upstairs with narrowed eyes, quietly observing him. The corners of her lips couldn't help but curve up. From his external appearance, Tang Wan had a smile on his face, seeming cultured and refined. His gaze was mild and polite, but he kept a proper distance away from everyone. He truly wasn't the bewitching little vixen Madame Zhong had spoken about. Disregarding what background he had come from, Tang Wan's words were natural and unrestrained. In the face of so many nobles, there wasn't a place where he was lacking in manners. No one could say that he was brainless and only knew how to act coquettishly. With a smile, the empresses recorded this moment and sent it to Madame Zhong. Because you vented at me, they deliberately angered you. See for yourself, this is your Zhong family's little Furin's true face. You stole something good. When she said this, the empress's heart ached. This clearly was her family's child. The empress looked at the crown prince, who was standing beside a window. The other was sticking a finger out to move the wind chimes on the windowsill. His beautiful heterochromatic eyes gradually narrowed to slits. It was a mystery what he was thinking. The empress sighed regretfully. This Tang Wan could have such a bearing without any training. If he had been provided with a crown princess's resources, this child would have absolutely been a perfect empress who could help Carlos hold up half the sky. This perfect crown princess candidate and Carlos were unexpectedly destined to meet, but not fated to be together. It really was a pity. In short, the empress's anger towards Duke Tang had increased greatly again. Soon, Tang Wan was surrounded by people and nearly all of the nobles knew what the marshal's wife looked like. Only then did the empress come down from the second floor to rescue Tang Wan from the crowd. As family members, since we're meeting for the first time, we should have a proper talk. Everyone can chat first, I'm taking this person away. Nobody dared to stop her and politely opened up a path. They watched Tang Wan being pulled upstairs by the graceful empress. The nobles who were friends gathered in small groups of 3 or 4 and whispered, the marshal's wife is really good. Looking. Supposedly, the pure Asian beauty's background aren't very good, but that can't be seen from his mannerisms. He looks a bit like the crown princess, and his surname is also Tang. So, when the crown princess is mourning his mother, the empress not only did not care or ask questions, she also personally threw a banquet. Doesn't this go against common sense? Shoo, speak less and ask less. Tang Wan sat beside a window on the second floor. In this position, he could see all of the nobles below. He could also see the garden outside, his view was expansive and he was sitting comfortably. The empress had deliberately found this seat for him. The empress took the refreshment that the maid offered and enthusiastically said. Taste this snack, I made it myself. Call Zhong He up later, so that we can share a meal as a family. The empress's appearance was gentle and pleasant. With just a glance, he could tell that she would be an easy person to get along with. Tang Wan smiled and thanked her. She truly deserved to be called the mother of a country. She could comfort people with her words. The main purpose of today's banquet is for you to get to know every major noble's family. You don't have to communicate with them, but you should know who they are, so that you won't offend them if you meet in the future. The empress smiled at Tang Wan and calmly introduced them one at a time. Tang Wan ate the snacks while he was memorizing people. It didn't matter if they were male or female, he memorized them all. In this time, they had managed to clear this many nobles without mentioning the issue with Duke Tang's family at all. Tang Wan calmly sipped a mouthful of tea. TSK, the imperial family already knew. The empress's ability to concentrate and her boldness was admirable. Had Zhong He gone looking for his cousin for this matter? Nearly half an hour later, Tang Wan was still talking to the empress, and had already figured out all of the powers. At this time, Zhong He, an uncle, and young heterochromatic-eyed crown prince came up to the second floor together. The empress stood up with a smile, let's go. We'll let them speak leisurely and then we can go eat. Tang Wan stifled his laugh. This empress was very interesting. She didn't care if she abandoned them. Zhong He walked towards Tang Wan and pulled on his wrist. His eyes were gentle as he asked. We'll leave after the meal. Tang Wan smiled, I'll listen to you. He had also determined that Zhong He and the imperial family's relationship was very good. Then, when he thought of how he had misunderstood the emperor's infidelity, Tang Wan felt guilty. Fortunately, he now knew the truth. Otherwise, his mouth would be saying one thing while he would be madly cursing the other in his heart. He would be very sorry. With a simple meal, the atmosphere was very harmonious. The emperor really did look at Zhong He like he was looking at an older son. He must share a drink with Zhong He. Seeing that he was in good health, his eyes curved up happily with his smile, always wanting to pat Zhong He's shoulder. Zhong He's temperament was a little cold, but was helpless under his cousin's gaze. He was even a little unhappy. When the other leaned over, he would shrink away. He just wanted to pour wine for the other and let him eat and drink and not spew nonsense. The crown prince helped his uncle drag his father back, also with a face of helplessness. Watching from the side, Tang Wan thought it was delightful. The Empress gently told Tang Wan. Their relationship is very good. During the time zone he was injured, your cousin couldn't sleep for several days. Carlos kept saying that zone he had only been injured to save him. To save this son, the other had been sacrificed. Zone he unhappily raised his glass and poured its contents down his cousin's throat. I'm not your son, you're not that old. Drink more and talk less. Tang Wan looked at Zong He's curved lips and he also smiled. Fortunately, Zong He still had a family. His mother wasn't reliable, but the imperial family treated him very well. The crown prince was sitting at the side, entirely with the attitude of a younger generation. He didn't speak much until he finished his meal. Only then did he glance at Tang Wan and coincidentally, Tang Wan was also looking at him. The two pairs of eyes were staring at the other. Tang Wan smiled, not speaking to him. Carlos asked with a smile in his eyes. I heard that you lost your memories. Tang Wan nodded, and I forgot everything I was supposed to forget and everything I wasn't supposed to forget. I don't plan on treating it. Carlos laughed, truly, there are some things that are better off being forgotten. If it's forgotten, then leave it be. Zone he had already poured drinks for his cousin. Though he hadn't drunk much, he was still a little tipsy. He narrowed his eyes and watched Tang Wan and Carlos speak. He was a little upset. Tang Wan was afraid that his next words would be to send the crown prince away. He quickly turned around and asked, concerned, you didn't drink that much, right? Zone he shook his head and looked at his cousin, who was already lying down on the table, sleeping, and said bluntly. Didn't drink a lot. Tang Wan pursed his lips and almost laughed out loud. If he took a picture of this and uploaded it to the internet, he didn't know how much interest it would rouse. As he thought of this, Tang Wan quickly shook his head. He couldn't be such a devil, he needed to be a good man. Can we count this as a dinner date? Bonus KO.fi Chapter Chapter 52.2 You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator Callous Editor Walker seeing that it was already 9 o'clock and the conversation was dying down, Zone he led Tang Wan, let's go home. Go home was Tang Wan's favorite words to hear. After they left the imperial palace, Zone he could still see that Tang Wan was still very happy from those two words. He affectionately pinched Tang Wan's cheeks, they don't want you, they're stupid. Tang Wan's eyes curved with his smile, correct. They're stupid, you're the smartest. Zone he smiled and rested his head against Tang Wan's neck. Tang Wan could smell the faint scent of wine and he gently pressed his face against Zone he's head. He uneasily asked. Are you really okay? Can cats drink alcohol? Zone he didn't make a sound, but it didn't seem like there was a big problem. He closed his eyes, and it was a mystery what he was thinking about. Tang Wan smiled and smoothed out his hair. He quietly looked out at the night scenery. He had been wearing a smile the entire time. Going home was the best feeling. After they got home, Tang Wan spoke to Lin Bo first, so that he wouldn't worry and could go to sleep early. When he returned to his room, Zone he had already washed off the scent of wine and recovered his solemn appearance. You're too strict with yourself. Tang Wan really admired him. It was tiring to be a marshal. Tang Wan quickly reached the bed, and while he used a hand to undo the complicated buttons, the other was already opening his terminal. At the banquet, he had noticed that there was an imperial reporter in the corner. He knew that they were going to release news about him to the public. Even if the imperial family knew his identity, they would give Zong He face, and not pursue this matter again. Tang Wan opened up the StarNet and sure enough, someone had already taken a photo of him and uploaded it to the internet. The true face of the marshal's wife had finally been revealed. A lot of people said. The marshal could still find such a good-looking partner when he was ill, he truly deserves to be a marshal. Tang Wan wondered, if you had fragmented that day and split yourself into copies like paramecium, would everyone accept that too? It would only be correct to think that you're omnipotent. Zong he gave a bitter laugh, probably. This point also gave him a headache. He must be all powerful and couldn't be weak, otherwise, the people wouldn't be able to bear it. What is a paramecium? Tang Wan very solemnly drew a hairy shoehorn for Zong He to see. Zong He's eyes narrowed in disgust. For a moment, Tang Wan imagined what Zong He would look like fragmenting, with a de zhuang sprouting from the top of his head. He found that it was unacceptable, it would burn his eyes. Tang Wan took the initiative to rub Zong He's neck, like he was petting a large cat. He coaxed, "I'm teasing you, it's just a joke." Zong He bowed his head and looked at the beaming Tang Wan, who was lying down on the bed. He looked like delicious prey. Do you know what touching the neck means? Tang Wan objected. Like attracts like, look at how you're thinking. If you were a gentleman, then nothing would come of touching, but if you were a rogue, then even touching a whisker would be taken as seduction. Zong He helped him pop open a difficult button, his low voice filled with lust. Upon hearing it, it seemed to have a bit of repressed sex appeal. I've never been a gentleman. Tang Wan's ears flushed and his gaze shifted. He was too embarrassed to look into Zong He's lust-filled golden eyes. No one's asking you to always be a gentleman, but can you let me bathe and change my clothes first? I can't wait, we can speak after we finish. Zong He simply didn't give him any excuses to escape and crudely stripped off Tang Wan's formal clothing. At the same time, the crown princess that many nobles had been thinking about, arrived at the balcony with a pale complexion. He found Tang Tinji and asked with a gloomy expression. What do you mean, placing me under house arrest? How do you plan on explaining it to the imperial family? Tang Tinji held his chin, his head not shifting. I know what I'm doing. Do you think that the imperial family doesn't already know? You're just a fake, no one would care about you. Because of Tang Tinji's words, Tang Yu's face became even paler. Tang Tinji asked with a smile. Are you happy being the crown princess? Tang Yu pursed his pale lips. He couldn't tell what Tang Tinji was thinking from his expression, so he didn't dare to answer rashly. Now, not only was his small life was pinched in the other's hands, but his mother had been locked away as well. He didn't have maternal grandparents to help him. He didn't even have anyone to ask for help. Whether he lived or died, or even how he died, all depended on Tang Tinji's mood. Tang Tinji wasn't satisfied with his hesitation. I asked, are you happy being the crown princess? Tang Yu kneaded the palm of his hand, and responded nervously. Of course, he's very outstanding. Tang Tinji smiled, but his meaningful glance made Tang Yu tremble. You like him? Tang Yu lowered his gaze, of course. Tang Tinji, then, does he like you? Tang Yu jolted, his face already completely bloodless. He worked hard in all of his studies, to be a perfect crown princess. However, he couldn't win Carlos's love. The other treated him well only for the sake of keeping up appearances. There were many rules and etiquettes, but they hadn't gotten intimate at all. To this day, the number of times they had held hands was very small. Those times had been they were putting on an act in public and had no other choice. He knew that the other had no feelings for him. The little Duke Tang narrowed his eyes and gracefully wished him well. I wish you happiness. Because of this blessing, Tang Yu almost collapsed to the ground, his heart and soul firmly struck. He lowered his head, restraining the despair in his eyes. I want to see father. Tang Tinji was amused. You're not going to see your mother, but your father. Your choice is very interesting. Are you thinking of begging him to help you? He doesn't want to see you. I think you should go visit your mother, she's not in a good mental state. Only when Tang Yu had seen his mother did he finally understand what Tang Tinji had meant by not in a good mental state. In a day and a night, his mother had already been tortured to the point of insanity. The lady who had paid careful attention to her appearance every day was now unkempt and locked in a dark, small, and humid room. When she heard footsteps outside, she hid under the table in a panic, holding her head and trembling. Mother. Hearing her son's voice, Lady Tang's eyes brightened and she hurried out from underneath the table and rushed over to the door. There wasn't a single window in the entire room. She smacked the door and shouted in a hoarse voice. Son! Quickly help me get out. Go find the Crown Prince. Quickly rescue me. I don't want to be here, it's too dark and there are bugs. There are wild animals crying out at night. Tang Yu, please help me out. Aren't you the Crown Princess? Why did you wait so long to come to save me? As soon as Tang Yu thought of the possibility of hearing that the engagement would be cancelled tomorrow, he laughed at himself. Mother, you think too much. Now, the entire family is in Tang Tingy's hands. I can't even leave, to say the least about begging the Crown Prince. Impossible. You are the Crown Princess. I've worked so hard to make you the Crown Princess, and you can't even do this. You're a waste. A useless person. You can't even win over a man, you've wasted your face. Lady Tang's words passed the door and heavily struck Tang Yu's heart. It made him feel as if he had been struck by lightning. Standing numbly in front of the door, he couldn't stop his tears from falling. He asked with red eyes. Mother, if I can take you away now to a civilian planet to live in peace, throwing away the power and glory of the Tang family and discarding the title of Crown Princess, will you follow me? I can make money in the future, and I can support you. Why should I go? Lady Tang reacted instantly. I am the Duchess. I am the mother of the Crown Princess. I won't go. I want to kill Tang Tingy. I've been blind and tricked by him for so many years. Tang Yu closed his eyes and heard his mother's hysterical crying from inside the room. He couldn't help but chucked, not paying attention to anything else. He felt that the life he had been living was like a joke. No one had ever asked him what he really wanted. Since childhood, he had been arranged to put on a mask and become someone else, to replace the other person in their life. Now he understood that what his mother had done wasn't for him, but for herself. Tang Yu dazedly turned around and mechanically walked step by step to go find Tang Tingy. If I break off the engagement with the prince, will you let me go? Tang Tingy grinned. Where do you want to go? Tang Yu expressionlessly said. To a place where nobody would recognize me. I won't step foot onto Beta Ursi Minoris for a lifetime. Tang Tingy laughed. Not saving your mother. Tang Yu's face was pale. He had nothing to say. Tang Tingy stood up and walked to Tang Yu with a faint smile on his face, just like the gentleman he typically was. Gage told me not to be blinded by hatred. I thought about it. The only one in our family who hadn't done anything to us brothers was you. You replacing Gage was organized by your parents. I should thank your tutors. The Crown Princess's tutors had been arranged by the imperial family. Their way of teaching is indeed much stronger than your mother's. If I think about it, I'm embarrassed to have acted out against you. I agree to you breaking off the engagement. Tang Yu's eyes brightened, but Tang Tingy suddenly changed the direction of their conversation. However, I won't be letting you go. After all, you're the child she gave birth to. Even if you were taught even better, you share something with her under the surface. For the sake of your own well-being, you were cruel enough to want to escape to someplace far away. I wouldn't dare to let you go. I'm afraid that you would do something that will give me a headache. Tang Yu bit down on his lip. He couldn't say a single word. Tang Tingy smiled. Okay, let's break off the engagement first. Our family has a good line of business, it wouldn't be a problem to support you. In the future, don't think about leaving. Being at home is good, where you can serve your parents. I think another small house can be built in the rear mountains. You can choose your own location. With this sentence, Tang Yu's future was determined. Tang Tingy wanted to place him under house arrest for the rest of his life. The next morning, Tang Wan opened his eyes at the time he was accustomed to waking up. Dazed, he looked at the ceiling. Exhausted, he raised his hand and rubbed his stinging eyes. It should be a mistake, how could there be circles spinning on the ceiling? Zong he pulled him closer and lazily said. Go back to sleep. Tang Wan looked out of the window, there's daylight. Zong he reached out and closed the curtains, so that the room darkened and he could no longer see his own fingers. No, there's no daylight. Oh. Tang Wan turned over, and unthinkingly burrowed into Zong he's arms. He fell into a deep sleep. At this time, Tang Wan's Weibo had already fallen into a nearly explosive state of affairs. After the announcement last night, everyone in the empire knew what the marshal's wife looked like. Many people had seen Tang Wan, especially when he went to the theme park with De Zhuang. His fans already recognized him, and had his photos. To their surprise, they noticed that eating, sleeping, and scolding De Zhuang was the marshal's partner. The fans all went crazy, begging him to show his face, to please give them the accurate information. Was it true? Was that person really you? Can you officially give an accurate statement? Why have you concealed it for so long? Heavens! Then hasn't my dream lover become my dream lover's partner? So, does that mean that when Tang Tang and the marshal got married, the marshal was still in a coma? As soon as these words came out, everyone went silent. Originally, it was shocking and explosive news. The mysterious host was the marshal's wife. Although they didn't know why, even though Tang Wan had such a large backing, but he never mentioned it before, it wasn't important anymore. What was important was that Zong he wasn't cast of iron and steel. He was also a man and could be injured and ill. Many people who had wanted to know about Zong he also paid attention to Tang Wan, hoping to get information from him. Just as the fans were feeling anxious, eating, sleeping, and scolding, De Zhuang posed on Weibo. It's true. Fans. Zong he finally got to eat some meat, degree.